Welcome, everybody, to Bulletproof Selling. My name is Sean Rhodes, and I'm the Chief Sales Architect and author of Bulletproof Selling. Now, here we believe that hope is not a sales strategy. So we're here to increase the performance of salespeople and the results of their teams through better pipeline management. So on this weekly selling series that we have, we share insights from the top minds in sales, best-selling authors, speakers, folks that are actually out there on the front lines helping and managing their sales teams grow. And my commitment is that out of every single episode of Bulletproof Selling, we create a system that you can use no matter the size of your team or the size of your goals. So I'm very excited to be welcoming our guest on the show today, Mr. Dave Lorenzo. Now, Dave and I had met through a mutual contact, and he immediately impressed me the way that he thought about sales. And he's been able to grow a lot of businesses over the course of his lifetime, and now he gets to help sales teams and sales leaders get better results as well. So, David, welcome to the show, sir. Please tell us a little bit about kind of how you found yourself in this role. I mean, did you grow up thinking you were going to be doing this for the rest of your life?
Well, Sean, thanks for having me. And of course, thank you for your service. Can't say that enough. I really appreciate your service to our country. My background is much like everybody else's who gets into sales. It's kind of a long and windy road. I started my career as a bellman and working in hotels, carrying people's bags. And I learned that talking to people and being of service led to good things. I mean, it led to good things for the hotel. People would compliment the hotel based on the service that I provided and my colleagues provided. They would come back, and for me personally, the reward was bigger tips. And that kind of was the genesis of my thought process of getting into sales. 12 years later, I found myself running a brand for Marriott, the company that I started my career with. And I was thrust into a position where I had a good sized sales team and I had to develop a business quickly. So I just went out and started talking to customers. I wasn't trained in sales. I didn't know any formal process or system. And just asking our customers questions and helping them solve problems, sometimes in unrelated areas, always led to good things. And over the years, I refined my process, and then I was actually able to take a few classes and learn different types of sales methodology. But there was never any one thing that was a good fit. I was taking bits and pieces of things from everywhere until I just discovered that I had my own style. And really, I wasn't a knock on doors and call people I didn't know on the phone type of guy. I was more of a relationship-based sales guy. So I started asking my current clients and people who knew me, liked me, and trusted me for referrals. And then I realized that I couldn't scale that, right? There was no way, like I can get one referral from you today, but then I got to find somebody else to give me a referral. And then tomorrow I got to find two more people.
Keep feeding.
Right. So I had to figure out a way to scale that process. And that's how I got to where I am today. Now I work with mostly professional service providers. So CPAs, attorneys, architects, consultants, professional speakers, life coaches, people who deliver services that require them to be present most of the time. And I help them develop systems that scale their business development. So, it was a long and windy road and probably too long of an answer, but that's how I got here.
I love it, man. I love it. And you mentioned the word process and systems a few times. And so obviously we're all about that here. And we find that the reason that process and systems are so important in sales is that, like you said, so many salespeople hope that they'll just get another referral, or get a couple referrals every single day of the week. And when that doesn't happen, their pipeline starts to run dry. So where do you see a lot of the salespeople that you're dealing with, these service providers, over relying on hope in their sales strategy?
Oh my gosh, everybody thinks that. So they go to bed at night. Let me give you a good scenario. Something happens and somebody drops a bag of cash on a CPA, right? Somebody somebody decides, okay, you're going to do my taxes and my company needs to be restructured and 5 other things. And the CPA says, okay, I'm going to get you all straightened out. It's going to be $10,000. And the client says, perfect. I don't have to worry about this anymore. So what happens then, Sean, is the CPA goes to bed that night thinking, if I could just get one of these a day, that's $50,000 a week. I'd be all set.
Yeah.
And that's hope as a sales strategy, right? Because somebody dropped a bag of cash on you, or a bag of cash fell out of the sky, or you tripped over something and stumbled into a pile of cash. That's not a plan, right?
Yeah, that is not a
So
plan.
we have to do real stuff that you can replicate.
And you mentioned, having to scale what you were doing in order to find success. And so once we've realized that just hope is not going to work, because I think all of us, whether we're entrepreneurs or professional salespeople, and a lot of people would say there's not much difference between a professional salesperson and an entrepreneur. They're kind of running their own business. When they
Well,
realize hope is just,
three people just passed out when you said
I know,
that,
right?
by the
Oh
way. They're
my
like,
God,
oh,
I'm not an entrepreneur. Yeah. And it's interesting, especially commission salespeople that are full commission, or they have a very low base, or they're very dependent on eating what they can kill, right, so to speak. They have to get out there every single day and take specific actions that may not yield results for weeks, months, or even years. And so, as we begin to scale out what we're doing, how do you advise salespeople in your network to start looking for those things that are working? Because, I mean, all of us in the beginning days of sales or entrepreneurship, we're just throwing stuff at the wall and hoping that it sticks. And so, when
right.
that bag of cash does fall on us, I mean, for myself, I'm just speaking from my own experience, and I can never quite pinpoint what were the actions I took to get the bag of cash to fall. Because isn't that a great feeling? But I can't replicate that. So, how do you
Yeah.
recommend people really start taking a look at the foundational elements of building a process for themselves?
So the way to start, and it took me, you're 100% right. It took me probably 7 or 8 years to figure this out. The best way to start is if you have one client and they're a good client, ask them 3 questions. The first question you ask them is, where do you go to stay up to date on industry information? So on what's going on in the industry. So if you're in the B2B space, most of your clients will have a trade association or some type of organization they belong to that keeps them current on what's happening in their industry. The second question to ask them is, what websites do you visit or what do you read in order to keep up to date, stay current on information that's related to your industry or what you're doing? And I'll explain why in a sec, why these questions in a sec. Then the third question you ask them is, who else do you rely on? Who else do you trust? Who else do you work with that you can really count on? Okay. And the reason you're asking those 3 questions is because if you're going to develop a system that's going to help you reach people in mass, you want to reach a large number of people, these are the 3 places that you can start, regardless of whether you have a budget or not. So the first question was, where do you go to stay up to date? What associations do you belong to? So these days, we're at the end of March 2021. It's COVID time. We can see a light at the end of the tunnel, but we're still mostly, confined to interaction through virtual means.
Right.
So people are doing their association meetings virtually. Well, what you want to do is you want to, number one, go to some of those association meetings as a paid guest, or even if you have to pay a small fee for a sponsorship, you want to go to some of those meetings to understand the way your prospects think. And then you'd like to see if there's an opportunity for you to get in front of that group and provide some type of educational information. And this is so that you can be perceived as an expert, right? But that's the first place. Look, think about it this way. If you've asked your best client where they go and they give you an industry trade association meeting, you've got a pond that is stocked with the best possible fish you can fish for when it comes to sales, right? There's, 30 people on that Zoom meeting or 30 people in that room that probably have some kind of problem you can solve, because your best client is there and he or she has a problem you can solve, right? And the same thing is true with the website. So when you ask them, hey, what websites do you go to stay current with what's going on in your industry? You're going to visit that website every day and you're going to become familiar with the articles and the problems these people are having. And then you're going to write your own article and pitch it to the person who runs the website. And you're going to tell him or her, hey, I can give you one of these a month. And it's absolutely free. I'm not going to charge you for the information. And then if they have a webinar opportunity, you're going to do a webinar for that website, or maybe provide 3-minute videos where you give a weekly tip, or do some sort of provide some sort of educational information to them. And why are you doing this? If you're the person that educates them, when they have a problem that's related to the education you provided, they're going to go to you.
Yeah.
Right. And then the third question was, hey, who else is, working with you? Who else do you trust? Who else is selling something to you that you really rely on? You're doing this for the opportunity to develop a strategic alliance partnership. So in my case, for example, a lot of times I will work with a business owner or a professional, and they rely on an insurance provider to provide them with errors and omissions insurance. And one of the things I can do is I can do a joint seminar with that insurance provider, or we can do joint mailings. I can mail to his list and I'll let him mail to my list, or we do some sort of a newsletter together and we send it to both of our lists. So those are 3 opportunities. They cost you almost nothing, because a lot of these industry trade association events, you can be invited as a guest. Most of the time you can pay to go, and it's like $25 or $30 just to cover the cost of whatever snacks they're putting out. So if you're starting from scratch today, if you don't have an ideal client, go to somebody you think is your ideal client, buy them a cup of coffee, ask them those 3 questions and take notes. That's the best way to start. It requires 0 finances and maybe 20% of your intellectual horsepower to get started, but then you got to be really curious and take good notes.
So if I'm a salesperson, I'm already managing, let's say, 400 prospects. So instead of being an entrepreneur, I'm more in a traditional inside or outside sales role. So I've got all these prospects in my pipeline. I know that I could provide value to them, and I try to do that in the emails that I send and the messaging I talk about on the phone. But I'm in one of these industries that is heavily regulated, like finance, like the accounting industry, where especially if I'm a captive agent and I have to go through some other organization to offer my products or services, I have to clear everything with them, right? There's this legal hurdle that I have to hop through every time I try to provide information. So how do you recommend that salespeople that are working for another organization still implement this process that you're talking about?
Well, you said something really important right at the beginning of that. You said you already had 400 prospects, right? So you're in a regulated industry and you already have 400 prospects, and you have to go through another service provider. So here's what I would do. I would go to that service provider and I would say, I need some approved materials because I want to conduct monthly web seminars or live seminars when the conditions permit. And I'm going to invite 400 people every month. Well, they're going to be really excited, right? They're going to be super excited. So they're going to bend over backwards to provide you with the educational material. And then what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to look at that material and pick and choose what's right for you. And I would make it into a series. And I would make the series either monthly or every 6 weeks. And I would tell people, listen, you can sign up for the series. I would charge, actually, and this is where it gets a little controversial, I would charge a little something for the series, and I would create your own certification where you guys provide certificates for people who complete all 6 sessions, right? What will happen is, and by the way, what you can do is, as you're rolling these out, if people miss session 1 and 2, you can provide them with the video and they can answer a couple of questions and they can, fulfill their obligation to have attended. Now, here's what's going to happen. Of the 400 people, 20 are going to attend at the beginning, and you're going to provide huge information, really valuable information. And as those sessions wrap up, you're going to ask those 20 people, if they're live, you're going to ask them for a live testimonial. If they're web-based, you're going to say, hey, listen, would you mind giving us a testimonial to let us know what you thought about the content and to tell us what we should be doing more of? Then you're going to take those testimonials and you're going to send them out with the invitations in the future. And this thing is going to snowball. And you'll find out that by the time, if it's a 6-session series over, say, 8 months or 9 months, if you do it every 6 weeks, by the 3rd session, your attendance is going to have tripled. You'll have 60 people in, then you close off registrations and you put up another date for when you start this again. And you don't have to start it at the end. You can start it when you're at the middle, just run a different group. So now all of a sudden you're the go-to person for this information. All the information is completely blessed by your service provider. Your testimonials are about the educational sessions. The testimonials are not about you providing the regulated service. So you're not sending out testimonials that endorse you as a service provider. You're sending out testimonials endorsing these education sessions. And most of the time in regulated industries, you'll get the blessing of the people who are the regulators because you're conducting education sessions and they're not giving testimonials for you as a service provider. So that's a way, those 400 prospects, there are 20 clients immediately in there, and there are 20 clients who will do business with you within the next year. They just have to get to know you, like you, and trust you. So you've got an asset there. You don't need, if you've got 400 prospects, you don't need to make cold calls until every one of those 400 people has told you to go jump in a lake. You're in great shape with 400 prospects.
Yeah, and then of course, there's a lot of controversy around the definition, or the difference, I should say, between a prospect and a lead. For a lot of people, a prospect is somebody that's already expressed interest, and for other people, those 400 may just be leads, in that no one's expressed interest, but I know they're qualified buyers. They have a history of using service providers like me, or buying products like the kind that I sell. So if we're thinking about the idea of building up that kind of a base, whether it's building a list or building a group of prospects to begin targeting, where do you see salespeople drop the ball in the idea of building a pipeline? So not just a funnel, not just let's try to jam people into a 3 email sequence, and if nobody responds, they leave forever. But how do I really start to build this book of business where I have a list that does regularly hear from me, not just through blasting an email each week, but maybe through a phone call, a birthday card, something that's a little more of a personal touch, just to keep me top of mind as a salesperson throughout the year? How do I go about building this pipeline and moving out of the idea of just hoping somebody responds to an email blast?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things we do with our clients is we walk them through what I call a revenue roadmap, right? And we've already covered the first 3 steps. So step number 1 is to identify your ideal client. Step number 2 is figure out where you can find them in mass, where you can find them in groups, right? And then step number 3, when we get to step number 2, we call those folks suspects. We don't use the term leads, because, like you said, leads can be a confusing term. So we call them suspects because we suspect they would make good clients if they got to know us, like us, and trust us, right? So you've got all these suspects, and they're rounded up now. You know where to find them. What you've got to do is you got to get in front of them in a group, and then you got to make an offer. Now, some people call that offer a lead magnet. I use the term honeypot, right? So sometimes it's a free report. Sometimes it's a consultation. Sometimes it's a video course. That's what separates suspects from prospects. That conversion point is when they've decided to raise their hand and say, you've got something that interests me. I need to find out more. Okay. That now they're worth investing a little bit more time in. So what we do with those prospects, they opt into our list. Whenever someone opts into my list, my choice is to get a phone number from them as well as an email address. And here's the thing, Sean, and this is kind of controversial. A lot of people will say, oh, just get their email address and then you can email them for years. Well, you and I both know that there's 2 problems with that, right? One problem is email deliverability. The second problem is they give you an address that's an AOL address. Remember AOL, right? Amateurs Online, right? That's their that's where all of their crap goes, from the acai berry thing they ordered 3 years ago to the websites that they visit that they're not supposed to be telling their spouse about, right? So all of that stuff goes to their AOL address. So if they give me that, I want to get a phone number from them. So after I've gotten their information, I do something that a lot of people don't do. At this point, I not only email them, everybody does that, but I also reach out to them with just one phone call. And I do this myself, even if it's 300 people. I reach out to them with one phone call and I say, hi, it's Dave Lorenzo. I want to thank you for requesting the information. And I also wanted to follow up to see if you have any questions. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me, and I give them a number that if I'm not busy, I answer. And what happens with that is if I get them on the phone, I can then ask them 4 quick qualifying questions and determine whether they're going to be somebody who I can do business with today or somebody who I'm going to do business with down the road. And, probably 5% of the time, there's enough urgency where something can happen right now. But if I didn't make that phone call, I'd miss out on that 5%. So if they don't respond, and 85% of the time I don't get a person on the phone and they don't respond, then they go onto my nurturing list. Now, with that nurture list, I do email, but I also do something interesting where I will ask by email if they will give me their physical address in exchange for, usually I'll send them a copy of a book or something of value. When they give me their physical address, I then send them a monthly print newsletter. Now, this costs about $1.25 per person I send it out to, but my lifetime value of a customer supports that expenditure, right?
Sure, sure.
So I send that out every month. So that's 2 points of contact. They're getting a weekly email newsletter and a physical newsletter. The third thing we've done is we've created a free community of people on Facebook, and then I opt them in. I offer them the opportunity to opt into that free community. In that community, I give them 4 pieces of brand new content every day. And I go live. I try to go live every day. Right now, we're doing it about 4 or 5 times a week. We're ramping that up to every day. The people who are in that community are the people who are going to be my clients. It's just a matter of time.
So you mentioned
that
something that's
contact,
critical
and everybody can do that. And anybody can create a community.
Right. Right. Whether you're a salesperson that's working captive for another company, whether you're an entrepreneur on your own, absolutely. So you mentioned something that I know a lot of salespeople struggle with because their sales leaders tell me they struggle with it, and that is the response time on an inbound inquiry or a notice of interest or an opt-in on a website. A lot of the sales teams that I get to work with, if they have the ability to just set something up on their own, they do. But for a lot of them, that comes through their marketing department. And so their regional manager, their sales leader will say, hey, Bob, here are the 15 leads you get this week from the people that have expressed interest on the website. And it's up to me to really follow up on those. So let's build a system around this, because I think no matter where someone is in their sales journey, it's a process that is going to be massive to their success, because an inbound inquiry is infinitely easier to get on the phone, to close, to have a conversation with than somebody who's never heard of me, never heard of my product or service, isn't quite sure that they need what I have to sell. That's like a massive hurdle, a massive hill to climb. But if you've already expressed interest, wow, we can already start that horse at full board down the track. So when we talk about building systems, building processes, it's all about trimming hope away from our sales strategy. So we use this acronym TRIM, TRIM, in order to build a system. So let's start with this. You get to build it with me here. So the trigger on this, the T. What triggers this sequence to come into play for you, for your company, or how do you recommend it for a salesperson? Is it a qualified lead, somebody that's turned over their email address and their phone number, somebody that's expressed interest? How would you trigger something like this inside of a sequence that you wouldn't have to manage in your head?
Yeah, so I'm lucky. I use a CRM system, and the CRM system will automatically send them when they request the revenue roadmap. The CRM system automatically gives them access to that and sends out a welcome email. And then I get a notification immediately, and I try to immediately pick up the phone and call and say, "Hi, it's Dave Lorenzo. You just requested my revenue roadmap. If you have any questions at all, I'm here for you. Here's my number." And that's a direct line to me. You're not going to reach a recording or a machine. It's not going to go overseas. It's going to come right to my phone. And if I'm busy, just leave your number and I'll call you back absolutely as soon as I can. And so I do that immediately.
To check on, hey, were you able to download the thing, right? Did it open for you? Just to follow up, to be a good service provider. Okay, so I love it. We got a trigger in place. Now let's try to make this repeatable, because I don't want to have to remember every time that email shows up in my inbox that I need to do these 15 or 20 things. And so you mentioned something critical, that this gets managed inside of a CRM first. Right. So without getting into the technical details of how that works inside your particular CRM, how would you recommend a salesperson establish something that's repeatable, that lives outside of their head, so that one of these inbound inquiries comes in, there might be a sequence of 15 things that need to happen in the next 6 months, right? If I get no response, to kind of drip campaign or call or email or LinkedIn message or whatever, where do you manage that so that you don't have to remember the steps?
Yeah. So when I didn't have a CRM, and when I worked for somebody else, and we would get inbound inquiries, and let's be candid here. If somebody's pitching you the inquiry, somebody's sending it to you, a lot of times it's not the best lead in the world, right? It's a scene out of Glenn Ross, right? Yeah. Everybody else is getting the good leads and you're getting the crap leads. Like, everybody feels that way. So, but you got to weed through it. Like, 1 out of every 10 might be great, and you don't know which one. So you gotta be the guy who goes through them, right? So what I would do before the days of a CRM, I would have, if you have an assistant, your assistant gets the leads. He or she's on the lead email. They would just put an appointment on my calendar that day. So I would come back from lunch, and on my calendar there'd be a 2:00 appointment, and it would be Joe Smith website inquiry. Here's the phone number. So I would sit down, 2:00. I make the call. I mean, it's on my calendar. I'm going to make the call, right? So if you don't have an assistant and you don't have a CRM, those leads are going somewhere. What you have to do is you have to find where those leads are and make them appointments on your calendar. That's the easiest thing from a time management perspective, I'm the worst time manager ever. The easiest thing that I learned to do is just put it on the calendar. And I have, I've got like 5 screens, literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screens in my office. One of them has my calendar open constantly so that I stay on track, and I don't know, I don't need to know what I'm doing next. I just look at the calendar. So, make sure the leads go on your calendar with the phone number and you call them.
Okay, love it. So we got the trigger. Making it repeatable is having it at least immediately the next step on your calendar. And then I imagine to have the follow-up steps, whatever that sequence might look like, that campaign mapped out somewhere on a spreadsheet, in a CRM, somewhere else. So the I in this acronym TRIM is to make it improvable. So I would take a guess, because you're that type of guy, that when you started doing this, the way that you responded to inbound inquiries is a little different than the way you might do it today. Yeah. So what do you recommend salespeople do to take a look at this and figure out what's working well, what's not? Is it a phone call and a message and a social media message? Is it a LinkedIn message? Is it a video I'm sending? Like, how do you begin to make this thing improvable so that it does get you better results as time goes on?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, you bring up a funny story. When I was in consulting, I worked for a big company, and they had this philosophy that it's poor positioning to call too quick, right? So it was like the scene. If anybody who's seen the movie Swingers, great scene with Jon Favreau, where they say, when are you going to call her back? We can't call it today. No, definitely can't call it tomorrow. No. 5 days. That's what we're going to call 5 days.
Right. Yeah.
So this company was insane. Everybody was like, oh, you can't call right away. If you call right away, you're going to seem needy. You know what? I got to call right away. I'm going to forget about it. So I was never the person who would put it on the calendar for 5 days. I just put it on the calendar as soon as possible. Right. So the way that I improved there was positioning is being of service. If you can provide value to someone, they're going to work with you, and they're going to, whether they think you're busy or not, it doesn't really play into it. So that's how I improved. That's a big improvement I made right at the beginning. I'll tell you what we do now. One of the things that I love to do, in addition to calling and following up, occasionally I will do a video, like on, say, use Loom, say, to do a screen capture video. And I will send them a screen capture video, and I will say something to them about, hey, you just downloaded the revenue roadmap. I wanted to send you a 3-minute video to give you a preview of what you're going to see in the roadmap. And here's the system. If you have any questions at all, here's my phone number. I already reached out to you and left you a voicemail, so I'm not going to call you again. I don't want to bother you. But I just wanted to show you the system in case you're somebody who prefers video to the written word. And then the other thing that we discovered worked really well over time was we send about 3 weeks after, we have a sequence where I follow up 3 times over the course of 2 weeks after they've downloaded the report. And then I wait 3 weeks after, and I send them an email, and the email is, who can I introduce you to? I want to help you grow your business. Tell me who I can introduce you to, who's the right client for you. And then we link to a testimonial of someone who's not a client, who I connected with somebody else. And they say in the testimonial, I wasn't even Dave's client, and he introduced me to somebody, and it was worth $10,000 to me in my business. Dave is a fantastic guy. So what happens then is, if people open up that video and they watch that video, they're like, I guess this guy's for real. I guess he really does want a relationship. And, about 30% of the time, people who open up that email and watch that video give me a call. And what they say is, the call always starts off like this. Hey, I saw that you're able to introduce people. My business is different. I don't know if you can introduce me to someone. And what do we call that, Sean? We call that a sales call, right? We call that a meeting. That's a sales meeting, because I get to ask questions about their business. I get to figure out what their problems are, and I might be able to solve their problems. So this person has invited themselves to a sales appointment.
Yep. I love it. I love it. So we've got the trigger, making it repeatable, making it improvable. And then the final piece to this, especially if it's not just us in the company running this process. Maybe I've got 12 or 1,200 peers that are all being required to use this same inbound inquiry sequence. How do I measure this to make sure that it's actually working? Is it in booked meetings? Is it in closed revenue? Is it in shortened sales cycles? Is it in, trying to figure out, what was the sales cycle on an inbound inquiry before, and did it get any shorter? Or how do I make sure my salespeople are even using it? That's another great way to, try to measure something to see if it's even working. Because we could talk about this stuff all day, but if nobody uses it, it ain't going to get you any results. So how do you recommend salespeople measure this entire sequence that we're talking about?
Right. So in terms of there's 2 levels of measurement. There's my measurement for me as the everyday salesperson, and then there's the management measurement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're an entrepreneur, you've got to do both sides of the coin.
Right.
So I'm a big advocate of only having a couple of metrics. I have 3 at each level that I have people use. So for the sales executive, for the account manager, what we measure is activity. Right.
Mm-hmm.
We have outcomes that we're looking to drive, and we know that, we may have a revenue target or, a monthly number we have to meet. And then we back into that monthly number by using, average sales size and number of sales we need to make. So as a rep, my goal was always, listen, I got to close at least 1 deal a day. So I'm driving until I close at least 1 deal. And if I close 1 deal in the morning, I consider myself in like bonus time. And I know that, I can put that in the bank for when I have a bad day and I don't close anybody. So, the first thing you're looking to do is you're looking to, it's a 0 or a 1, right? It's binary. Either I closed the deal or I didn't. So that's how much more simple can you be? The second thing is number of, inquiries that I've responded to that are brand new, because that's going to determine where I'm going to be 3 weeks from now, if my sales cycle is 3 weeks, or 3 months from now, if I'm in a bigger ticket, or a year from now, if I'm in a huge sales cycle, like corporate jet memberships or big ticket consulting, right? So number of new inquiries that I've responded to. And then the third element is how many of these impromptu conversations have I had? And those, I would call them, how many question and answer sessions have I conducted with people who've already become familiar with me? And I knew on a good, my business now, I know on a good day, if I have 2 of those, I'm closing 1. Those Q&A sessions in my business, it's a 50% closing rate, because they called me. I didn't, I didn't barge in on them, and they always call for a reason. And, in the 50-50 chance, I'll tell you, the ones that I don't close, I blew it, because they gave me every opportunity. It's not it's not like they're calling because they got nobody to talk to. I'm not that friendly, right? So they're calling because they have an issue, and either I didn't figure out what the right issue was, or I didn't create enough urgency. So those are the 3 things I measure. Those one-off calls. I measure I'm initiating them in a way, but they've called me. So, those I could get 3 in a day, or I could get none. And then, how many of those inquiries have I responded to? And, did I close a deal or did I not close a deal? Now, on the off chance that there's absolutely nothing going on, right? There's no inquiries that have come in. Nobody's calling me out of the blue, and I got nobody that I can reach out to close. That's when you reach out to either your current clients or your evangelist network, and you just check in, right? And let me be clear, an evangelist is somebody who has never paid you for anything, but they refer you business, right? And we all have those people. They're not in a position where they're ever going to need your services, but they know people who do, so they send you business. So on the off chance that there's no inquiries that I can respond to, and nobody's calling me, and there's nobody that I can close right now, I reach out to my evangelists, or I reach out to my current clients, and I just call them up. I leave as many voicemails as I need to until I've called through the entire list, or I've talked to everybody and the day's over, and I say, hey, I'm just checking in, want to see how you're doing. How's your month going? Is there anybody I can connect you with? What's, what if you could change one thing currently, what would it be? I'm just looking to see how I can help them, even if it's just making an introduction to somebody else. And often those calls will result in something. So my deal, my deal as a rep is activity, activity, activity. So the hierarchy of activity is inquiries, number 1. Obviously, if somebody calls you on the phone, you take that. But the inquiries that I've gotten, number 1, right? Number 2, then I go to immediately current clients to do check-ins. And then number 3 would be the evangelist check-ins. So that's kind of the hierarchy of activity. Now, on the management side, right? Wait, we still got to do management. So on the management side now, I like to look at number one, I just want to see activity, right? So
Right.
if the person's like, I want to know how much they've closed today. And if they haven't closed anything today, if it's short sales cycle, I want to see their activity. If they're doing all the right things, I leave them alone. I don't bother them. If it's longer sales cycle, I want to see what they're doing with the inbound inquiries, and have they advanced the inbound inquiry to the next level. And then I want to see how many people are directly calling them as a result of things that they've said in their voicemails. And if they're not getting both of those things, I'm going to sit down with them and I'm going to probably observe a couple of their calls, give them some pointers. We're not doing this to keep them under a microscope. We're doing it for improvement purposes, like the personal trainer in the gym making that one tweak to the technique that makes all the difference, right?
Right. In order to measure,
And then,
yeah. So that actually, what you've talked about so far, I think is enough for people to bite on and really sink their teeth into.
Yeah.
And obviously, this is why I love having you on the show, man, because you and I could go on about this for hours, because this is our world. This is what we love. So for people that want to do that, they want to get more into the inner circle, they want to get more into Dave Lorenzo's world, because I want people to go out there and be able to use what they've learned. They need to go out there and move some stuff, move some deals. Tell us about, how do we get deeper into your world, man? Websites, books, LinkedIn. Where do we need to go to get more Dave?
All right. So more Dave, free stuff. The Inside BS Show is my podcast. You are a great guest on that show, where we're cutting up the YouTube videos and we'll be sending them out. So the Inside BS Show, we have a new guest every day, 7 days a week. So if you want to listen to great interviews with salespeople and business leaders, absolutely free. Get it where you get your podcasts. If you want a copy of the revenue roadmap that you can use yourself, shoot me an email. And the email, just send it to askdave@dlorenzo.com. So ASKDAVE at the @ that's your email thing, DLORENZO.com. Shoot me an email that said you heard me on Sean's show. I'll send you a copy of the revenue roadmap and you can use it yourself.
I love it, man. And obviously, the resources that you've built, in addition to, every single day, for those of us that are out there making calls every day, that takes a lot of work. To host a podcast every day and interview every single day, that's a step above and beyond. And I know you're doing that not because you're getting paid for those podcasts, but because you believe in what you're doing to add value back into this community. So thank you very much for what you do. Appreciate that measure of service that you're putting back into the world. So for all of the things about Dave, check him out. For us, of course, we're on Facebook, LinkedIn, at Bulletproof Selling. And of course, this podcast, every single week we drop a new episode on Monday. We're not 6 or 7 days a week yet, but we're working on it, man. So you can get us on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. And of course, for more systems, for more processes, for more pipeline management tips to help you replace hope with certainty in your sales cycle, check out the free resources that we have over at www.bulletproof-selling.com. So Sean Rhodes here. It's been a pleasure serving you alongside my partner today, Mr. Dave Lorenzo. Dave, let's go out there and make selling bulletproof.
All right. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate it.